Check 1, 2, test 1. Are you still not getting anything, John? Can you just pull mine later? Okay, all right. You want that up here? Do you want it up here? Okay. I wondered about the cable. I didn't even think about that.
What was the number I had?
Check 1, 2, test 1, 2. Okay.
Yeah, just pick it up off there.
All right. Test 1, 2. Are you good now? All right. Anybody who hasn't, please turn off your cell phones or turn them down. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Y'all ready? Very good? Okay. With an unprecedented budget surplus we likely will never see again, now is the time to make transformative investments throughout the state. The governor outlined some solid proposals today, but after decades of neglect, much more needs to be done. In the coming months, we are hopeful that working with the governor and the majority party, we can restore Missouri's infrastructure, and not just in terms of brick and mortar and asphalt, but its people, to position the state for economic success. I am thrilled to hear the governor discuss issues that Democrats have been fighting for decades. Many initiatives that were increased in his budget proposals were things that our folks were actually able to get into the budget. Thanks to the Biden administration, we were able to see requests for infrastructure improvements like broadband and railways. We are glad to see expanding pre-K options, the child care subsidies, the child care initiatives, as well as large investments in our children's division, a division that has been overworked and underpaid for far too long. The governor outlined investments in higher education, and I'm pleased to hear the governor agree with us that the increase in state worker pay is a great place to start, but not nearly enough. And the governor is finally making maternal mortality a priority. I hope that the General Assembly takes note, that they listen to what the governor has outlined and not continue to dive into the culture war issues that seem to be their priority pieces of legislation making the headlines. While the governor is talking about investments, our colleagues in this building are talking about censorship. While the governor is talking about taking care of our families, our colleagues are focusing on extremes and division. Despite these mistaken political talking points that seem to be the legislative priorities for folks in this building, I am hopeful that the governor seems ready to focus on the things that unify rather than divide. The long overdue investment in our state's workforce, infrastructure, and people, on those things the Democrats are ready to get to work. With that, I'm happy to take questions.
There's $50 million for school security, school safety grants. Do you think that that's enough to stop school shootings?
Absolutely not. I appreciate the investment that the governor is requesting in safety protocols. I myself serve on a task force for Springfield Public Schools that looks at our facility programming and what we need to do to make buildings more secure and to keep our kids and teachers safe. But even with those investments, until we have serious conversation around guns in our state and being able to support our law enforcement do their jobs on the ground when it comes to that, we're going to not see nearly enough.
There was an increase in career ladder investment, but was that enough for teachers?
Yeah, again, the career ladder was something that we supported when it was originally put in the budget, but that, again, is a starting point. That is not the solution to teacher pay. As we all know that we are one of the lowest in the entire country, we've got to do more than just that.
What were your thoughts on that maternal mortality rate and what else can be done?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited, as I mentioned, to have the governor actually address that because I know since I've been here, been talking about that. We've had lots of initiatives. We've had task force after task force study the issue. So I'm glad to hear that there's finally going to be an investment. And you'll actually see pieces of legislation from some of our members being filed to address that and where we can pull some of that money in for some programming that we're really excited to start talking about.
You said state worker pay, not enough?
Not enough. I don't have a number to give you, to be honest with you, but I know that we are the last in the country, and we know that. That's been a topic of discussion for a very, very long time. This cost of living increase is barely a cost of living increase at all. And so I think it is a good starting point for that. I'm grateful. I've expressed my gratitude to the governor, but I hope the Budget Committee really does more.
On child care, the governor outlined an increase in the subsidy rate as well as the tax credit program. Are you satisfied with your current on that? Anything else you'd like to see?
Yeah, I am thrilled to see that, to be honest with you. And for those of you who know me, know that's one of my priority issues since I've been here. The subsidy one, I wasn't expecting from him, and I'm grateful that he put that in there. Of course, the tax credits are things that we're supportive of, but we want to continue to see more. For instance, we had some money in the budget last year for initiatives for small businesses to do some co-op grant funding, and I think there are a lot of opportunities that we can continue that discussion, and that's one issue that I know both sides of the aisle are ready to get to work on together.
I couldn't help but watch how many times both sides of the aisle stood up and clapped today. In all the speeches that you have listened to, that you've heard the governor say, is this the most that you agreed with, or that, kind of explain that. There was a lot of applause for both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I will be the first. I pointed out earlier that I was actually the first one to stand up in the entire speech, and our entire caucus stood up more than the other side, and that's absolutely true, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful that we are in a time, even in the super minority, to be able to stand up with the governor of our state so many times. But to answer your question, yes, I think this is the most that we've ever stood up for a state of the state, because quite truthfully, I feel like he took a lot of the budget priorities that we've been fighting for so long and wrote the budget with it. And, while we're not going to agree on everything as we dive into it, we are very happy with the starting point.
A visitor might have thought Mike Parson was a Democrat.
Didn't go that way.
Go on.
What do you make of that? Is there a shift that you see, and how do you hold the other Republicans in the legislature to his sort of wish list here?
Absolutely. I think that is a very good question and a good point that is worth discussing, that there is a shift. And it's not just in the governor's priorities, but we're also seeing it in some legislation that's being filed. And quite frankly, I think a lot of that goes back to the overturning of Roe. And we saw on the doors all over the state and all over the country that people were frustrated by that change. And so now we're seeing our colleagues on the other side of the aisle swoop around with more family support programs and actually help with pregnancy and help with the care of children afterwards. Again, things that we've been asking for a very long time, but we have seen a shift. Now, how that plays out with the legislature, I hope that we can continue with those issues, because those are things that we care about. Of course, that doesn't solve the overarching problem for our caucus, but I do believe that there has been a shift.
Speaking of that, obviously, I don't think there was any direct mention of abortion rights in his speech. Do you have any hopes that you can maybe meet him halfway on at least clarifying language around medical emergencies or birth control, that kind of thing?
That's a very good question, and it's one that, we're hopeful that we can find some conversation around clarifying language, particularly for our healthcare providers, making sure that they can do their jobs as healthcare professionals and actually save lives instead of lawyers getting involved. But meet halfway is not an option for us, and that's not meeting halfway. That's just providing basic healthcare and things that should not have been in question already. The fact that 126 was passed without clarity, with so much confusion and so much gray, is a travesty, and so I do hope that there is some room for some clarity around that.
I want to talk about I-70 because when we went to our budget background meeting today as reporters, that was like the first thing that they talked about, and then they talked about it multiple times. It feels like this I-70 thing is a big part of this year's budget. I even see people clapping. Talk to me about that. Happy? You want to see more? What's your response?
Yeah. Well, I will be first and say that our caucus hasn't taken a vote on do we want to expand it, do we want 3 lanes, do we not? That's not we haven't gotten down to the nitty gritty of that, but we do know that roads in our state are a huge issue. We know that Missouri, being in the center of the country, we are a hub for transportation, and not just in roads, but looking at our rivers and our ports. And so any sort of conversation and investment in that to continue to grow our economy, we are going to be supportive of. So I am really excited to see how that all rolls out and which bill moves forward and how we can flush out those priorities and figure that out. But yes, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us that we are excited.
On the early childhood education funding, do you think that sets a precedent for future years that the state is going to provide support for especially low-income kids to
Yeah, absolutely. I was very grateful to hear the governor prioritize early childhood. But I'll be honest with you, with the amount of money that we're talking about, I would love to see that expanded to every kid. That, it's wonderful that we're prioritizing low-income kids, but every child needs that first fresh start. And so I do hope it becomes a solid piece of our budget every single year, and not something that we have to talk about.
Speaking of setting precedent, last year, for the first time in many years, fully funding school transportation. It was told repeatedly, it's a one-time thing. Looks like that's not going to be a one-time thing. So thoughts on why this shift has occurred?
Yeah, well, first I will say we are extremely grateful to see that. It was about 2 decades worth of non-fully funding our transportation system. And as we're looking at so many of our school districts going to 4-day school weeks, this transportation piece is so important. The why, I think that's a big piece of it, right? So we have heard from our education providers and our teachers, administrators, all sides of that conversation, that they don't have enough money to keep the doors open, to keep staff in, to be able to pay them living wages, and to be able to want folks to come into their communities. I think transportation is a huge piece of that, and so I believe that's probably part of the transition into continuing to do that. But also, again, we have a record surplus, and so as we've said this whole time, we should be using this money to invest in our state for the long haul, and so we are grateful to see that.
On the teacher pay floor, the governor promised to keep that raised from the minimum up to 38K. But under state law, that still sets 25K. Would you like to see a statutory increase there? I think that's legislation.
Absolutely. I would love to see a change in that. As we all know, the budget changes every single year, and it depends on who's in charge and what that money looks like. I would love to see legislation corresponding with teacher pay to make sure that it stays that way or continues to grow.
Crystal, as the minority party, what is your main goal for this session, would you say?
We have one goal is very difficult when you're talking about an entire state of the Missouri, but I would say for us, focusing on where this money is being spent is a huge priority and a huge opportunity for us. As we've said many times, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for us to invest this type of money. And so I know for our caucus, we're going to be looking at every single way that we can do that, not just for our communities, but for the entire state.
Do you think you'll have a big say in what happens?
I absolutely do. Our team of budget members and not budget members have been able to get a lot of things done in the budget throughout the years. We're looking at even more money to be looking at this year. And there's been some change in process on the House side of how that's going to be dove into and invested, broken up in the committee structure. And so I absolutely know that we will continue to be a part of the budget process in a very serious way.
You're expressing a lot of support overall. Is there anything missing? Any line item or category that you thought should have been in this piece?
Absolutely. As mentioned, we stood up and clapped for the governor's priorities, almost every single thing that he said, and I am very grateful for that. But of course, there are always things missing. He touched on, and I know this one is near and dear to our caucus, but he touched on the shooting and death in St. Louis in one of our public schools. And while the question asked earlier, am I grateful for the investment in our safety? Absolutely, we are, but that is not enough. I would have loved to see an actual conversation around how we can keep our kids safe beyond that, how we can support our law enforcement to allow them to do their jobs, because in that specific case, our law enforcement tried to intervene multiple times, and they weren't able to because of state law. That is something that we need to be talking about. I would have loved to see a conversation around protecting the people's right to have a voice in their government. We have seen so many laws since I've been here go after people's ability to vote, and now we're hearing one thing after another about the initiative petition process, which the citizens have used time and time again to hold us accountable. I would have loved to have seen that in there. The list goes on. There's always more when it comes to priorities, but again, we are very happy with the things that he presented in terms of the budget investments.
Are you considering running for governor?
That is quite a question. Listen, I have a job to do, and I have the best honor of my life to represent these people behind me and the Democratic caucus across our state, and there is no better job that I would want to be doing, and so I am focused on that right now and doing my job for the next 2 years.
So you're not ruling it out?
No politician ever rules out anything.
There's $35 million in here for railway crossing and safety improvements. For those of you standing behind the podium, I'm curious, how often do you hear from constituents about kind of unsafe or obstructed crossings? How often does that come up for you all, and any general reaction to the funding?
I will definitely say first, I grew up in Webster County, Missouri, and that is a topic of conversation that I grew up with all the time, of trucks, or of there not being rail guards, et cetera. But I'm happy to open it up to anyone else who has thoughts on that. Anybody want to take the mic?
We think you got it.
Okay. Well, yeah, so I will continue to say that's... No, I think it is a huge priority, and not just, when we talk about railway safety, I know it is not just about the citizens who are crossing, it's also about the workers who are working on the railways. Those jobs are extremely dangerous, and so I'm happy to see from both sides of that conversation, because it's not one that's talked about often, so I was grateful to hear that.
There's some support for the money for youth behavioral health liaisons.
Mm-hmm.
How does this benefit the state, if you don't mind, just from your all's perspective? What's
Yeah.
the benefit of these jobs?
So these jobs go hand in hand with so many other pieces of our support system around kids who are at risk. And increasing the ability for us to hire folks, to pay them more, and to support wraparound, I think it's extremely important. And again, that's an area that is often overlooked. We have lots of top-line conversations about children's division, or, there's been a lot in the media about specific residential properties, but it's the workers on the ground who are so vital to success, and I think that those liaisons are going to be extremely beneficial to when we look at not just the right now for kids, but how we move them out. And so I'm, again, grateful that that is part of the discussion.
Could you compare working this session with last year during election year? Is it a little bit calmer? What's the temperature like?
Well, it's very early, and we've not had any committee hearings yet. But yes, it's always calmer when it's not an election year, and we know that. During an election season, and y'all heard me say it time and time again, not only was it election, it was a redistricting year. And we had folks on the other side of the aisle who are running against each other in every single position possible. And when that happens, you get extremes. And that's what happened last year. What will happen this session, is yet to be determined. We have a whole new Senate that opens its own can of worms, depending on how that goes. But yes, absolutely, I would say that going into a non-election year where we have a budget surplus, where the governor is talking about all the things that we care about, it is absolutely a different feeling this year. Other questions?
So that's positive? You think?
I would say even after last week's House debate where we talked about some really ridiculous things, yes, absolutely. I feel very positive in this moment. And we were joking before we started, the amount of times that we were standing up and clapping was weird. And, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And I know that the citizens want that from us. The citizens are tired of seeing us bicker and fight about whether or not I have to have sleeves on my jacket. That is not what the people sent us here to do. And so I am very glad that we're able to have this conversation today where we say we agree with the governor. Let's get to work.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
to jump in. Yesterday was the first day back for the CVPA students. What strategies or thoughts does your caucus have in getting people to work across the aisle for gun reform? Like you mentioned, law enforcement, everyone did what they were supposed to do, and 2 people were dead and 79 seriously injured. So how do you work across the aisle?
Yeah, so the first thing that you're going to see is that a lot of these kids are going to actually be in the building very soon. And so as soon as next week, I think. Possibly the following week. So a lot of these students are actually going to come to the building to talk about what happened, to talk about what it felt like to be a kid in that building in that moment in time. And we're going to have educators who were there come and talk to folks. And that is in my belief, and I know for a lot of us, step one is we have to get folks to understand how real this is. It's one thing for me in Springfield to see that on the news as a mother and be freaked out and be sad and be scared and call my colleagues in St. Louis. It's another thing when you hear it directly from those kids who are traumatized for life. And that's step one, is getting them here. And they're going to be here, and I hope that, and we will be having a press conference, I hope, with them. So I hope that you all come so that we can begin that discussion. Beyond that, it is getting our colleagues, just like any other issue that we disagree with them on wholeheartedly, it's getting them to see the humanity behind it, to see the dignity behind this discussion, and to understand that there is common ground, even in states like Missouri, when it comes to hot topic issues that save people's lives.
Are you going to have to do it quietly, though?
I don't intend to. I mean, we're...
It's something to the governor's desk?
We'll see. Obviously, a Democratic gun bill is not going to make it anywhere. We know that. We've been here for a while. But again, this isn't just about, as folks like to say, that taking guns away from people. That's not what this is. This is about law enforcement went to do their jobs that they knew was the right thing to do, and they were legally not allowed to, and now there are people dead. And that is not something we're going to be quiet about. And if that means that we have to, absolutely, we will be working with folks on the other side of the aisle. I hope they file a bill. I hope I can write it for them and hand it to them. But, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But step one is making sure that the folks in this building who write laws for the entire state of Missouri know what these people went through. Any other questions?
I wanted to ask, does the caucus feel fairly unified on its priorities going into this session, or are there any points of contention among the caucus on what your priorities are?
Oh, I will say that there's always contention around priorities. We've got folks from St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia, Springfield. I'm very proud of the diverse communities that we all represent, and with our caucus growing, that's even more so. And so, of course, each one of our communities has a number one priority that they're looking at. And then there are issues like sports betting and VLTs and things that, we're going to be very divided on. But I can tell you that the caucus is united in investing in our state in a way that helps its citizens for the long haul. This is not about pet projects. This is not about something for my district specifically. This is what we can do with an unprecedented surplus that is going to last beyond our time in this building. Okay, thank you guys so much.